Okay. Okay, everybody ready? We're ready. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Petrilli. I am the president of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, but today I am playing the role of Ryan Seacrest here on our American Idol style competition. I understand I don't have enough hair really to do that well. During Snowzilla last week, I suddenly decided it would be great if I let my hair start growing in and I could look more Ryan Seacresty, and clearly I needed to have started that process much sooner, like 10 or 15 years ago, but here we go. So we're going to give it a try anyways. So excited to be here today. We are here for a serious purpose, but we're going to do something serious in a very fun way. And it is an experiment, so thanks for playing along with us. The serious purpose is to generate some very concrete ideas for the states as they implement this new law, the Every Student Succeeds Act. It is also to generate some ideas that will help the Department of Education officials wrestle with some issues while they are drafting regulations. A lot of people were asking me, Mike, why were you in such a rush to do this program so early, especially since, it's going to be months and months and months, probably, until the department comes out with its draft regulations. Then they got to finalize the regulations. I mean, we are a long way until states can actually finalize new accountability plans under ESSA. The reason is because we want to make sure that when those folks over at 400 Maryland Avenue are doing their work, they have in mind the kind of innovative ideas that are going to be presented today, so that when they write those regulations, they don't accidentally, inadvertently close off promising approaches to school accountability, approaches that many of us would argue are allowable under the law. But if they make certain assumptions about what these things are going to look like, they might write the regs in a way that keep these things from happening. I will say I also wanted to do it today because today is Groundhog's Day. And for those of you who's seen the classic Bill Murray movie, Groundhog's Day, right? And so I want to make sure that the theme here is that we do not want to do the same thing over and over again on school accountability, okay? This is actually a chance, after 15 years under No Child Left Behind, for states to do this quite differently. And we have some fantastic proposals today about how to do it differently. All right, so now for the fun. Here's how it's going to work. We have 2 hours. We've got 10 finalists who are going to make presentations to present proposals. You can find all these proposals on our website at the event page. These proposals are no more than 2,000 words each, okay, but 2,000 words, 3 minutes. As you can tell, all we're providing time for is for these folks to hit the highlights of their proposals. And contestants, I would encourage you to focus on those things that make your proposal most unique and special. And I think usually you probably have a sense of what that is. Then our judges, whom I will introduce in a moment, will, American Idol style, get to chew them apart. Okay, we get to push back against some of these ideas and have a conversation. We will then let the audience here and at home vote, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We've got this super cool website that we found that will allow you to vote with your phones to see what you think about these proposals. And we're going to ask you to vote on, 4 different things. Either you love it, you could live with it, you hate it, or you think it's illegal under the law, okay? All right, and as we talked about earlier, some of these categories could be overlapping, I guess, which is an issue. We will try to encourage our friends at the Department of Education not to see it that way, right? But in my opinion, that if you love it, it should be legal. Now, let me be clear. We are not going to crown a winner today. Let me say that again. We're not going to crown a winner. Partly, that's because I am too cheap, and don't have the money to give cash prizes, okay? More importantly than that, though, we really want to stress that in the view of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, there is no one right way to do school accountability. Okay? One of the main reasons why Congress is giving states a lot more leeway about how to grade their schools is because of that idea that there's no one best system. Now, maybe there's some approaches that are better than others, smarter than others. I do think there actually are some very dumb ways to grade schools, and we have tried many of those under No Child Left Behind, and we're trying to move past that. But there's no one best way. So we're not going to have a winner, but we will get to see which ones the crowd and the judges like the best. Let me also thank all the people who put in proposals. We had 26 proposals come in from academics, from teachers, from high school students, graduate students, policy wonks across the board. It was very hard for me to pick just 10 to present today. Please do check out the other ones. There's some really great ideas in those other ones as well. You can find that all on our website. You should also know that just to keep it manageable, I told everybody focus on elementary schools. High school accountability is a whole nother ball game, partly because of graduation rates, but also, it just opens up a lot of other questions about how you do some of these other things. How do you do growth? How do you look at other indicators of student success? Hey, if this is successful, maybe we'll do it again for high school. How about it? Or somebody else out there could do that too. All right, I think that's all the preliminaries. So let's get started. First, our illustrious judges. Starting over here on the right, Dr. Tony Bennett is the former Florida Commissioner of Education and former State Superintendent of Indiana. A lot of formers in that title there, Tony.
Can't hold a job, man.
But, Tony, you should know, I don't know if any of you were here 5 years ago, but the last time we hosted an event like this, we called it America's Ed Reform Idol. We had states compete to decide who was the reformiest state. This, remember, in 2011, a very reform-friendly year. Race to the top was happening. There had been the Republican sweep in 2010. A lot of things happening. Tony Bennett won the prize as America's Education Reform Idol. You can find the pictures online, and he's back as a judge now. Very excited. Next up, we have Charlene Mendoza, who is a founder of the Arizona College Prep Academy, a charter school in Tucson, where she serves as a principal and as a teacher. She is also active with the Viva Project and has written extensively about equity issues. Thank you for coming all this way, Charlene, to be with you. Andy Smerick is a partner at Bellwether Education Partners and a Bernard Lee Schwartz Policy Fellow here at Fordham. He previously served as a Deputy State Superintendent. Were you ever confirmed?
I was confirmed.
You were actually confirmed. Congratulations.
But he hasn't been confirmed as a state board.
But he has not been confirmed yet in Maryland as a state board member, but he's working on that. He's also done stints at the Department of Education under George W. Bush, was a White House Fellow before that. And then finally, Joanne Weiss, who is the former Chief of Staff to former Secretary of Education Arnie Duncan. A lot of formers. And during her time at the U.S. Department of Education, she led the Race to the Top program and played a key role in designing the ESSA waiver policy. She's been involved in education reform for decades, including being a founding partner and COO at the New Schools Venture Fund before coming to the department. So a great panel of judges. These are folks, I think that, Joanne and Andy have been in the seat over there at the Department of Education, where you have to think about how do you promulgate regulations, how do you weigh state plans. Tony has been a state superintendent, has been writing these plans, developing accountability systems. Charlene knows what this looks like at the school level. So a great panel of judges. Did you guys decide who's going to be Simon in this setup, or Paula Abdul? Okay.
I'm Paula.
Yeah, Paula or Simon? Good. All right, so it is about time to begin. I'm going to introduce our first panelist very quickly. Then again, he's got 3 minutes to hit the high points of his design. Then the panel will grill him for a few minutes, and then we'll vote. My job is to keep this thing moving. Let me say a word about voting. I don't know if we can get this on the screen, but what we're going to do, if you can get your phones out, you want to go to www.govote.at. Okay, www.govote.at. And we'll get back, we'll do this again in a few minutes if you don't have it. There's a code that you'll need to enter in. If you get to that website, have you seen that? Folks at home, you can do this too. It's pretty cool. You enter a code 405353. Again, we'll do this again in a moment, and then you'll get to vote. It's going to be super cool. All right, so how are we doing on time? This is going to be the big challenge. We're going to have to keep this thing moving. Right on time, okay. All right, our first contestant from Bellwether Education Partners, may I introduce an alumni of the Obama administration's Department of Education, Chad Alderman.
I'll start by saying my proposal is not the best system that money could buy. Its design is a very good system that any state could implement right away. It starts with 3 basic design principles. Accountability systems should be simple. Any parent or teacher should be able to pick up an accountability report and intuitively understand what they mean. This accountability system should be clear. They should clearly identify which schools need to improve and how they need to do so. And the accountability system should be fair. They should hold schools accountable for what they can control and not be merely a reflection of who they enroll. It starts with test scores used as a screen for identification purposes. It has two indices that are equally weighted, achievement and growth. They use the same 5 performance levels that you might be familiar with under No Child Left Behind. There's some value in sending a signal about the proficiency measure, but we need to broaden that and de-emphasize proficiency and create incentives all along the achievement spectrum. The growth index is less sophisticated than some of the other growth models that are out there, but a pilot from the US Department of Education analyzed this sort of growth indice, and it found that it was very reasonable and actually quite consistent with some other more sophisticated models. But what it loses in precision, it more than makes up for in clarity and signals. Every student and every teacher can know exactly where students are and where they need to go in the following year. The system identifies the bottom 5% of schools and then any school that's similarly performing. I estimate that this would be about 30 to 40% in the average state. It would also pick up any school with low-performing subgroups or large achievement gaps. Finally, when in doubt, the state should over-identify schools for improvement. There's evidence from the No Child Left Behind era and even before the No Child Left Behind era that being identified for school improvement sent a strong signal to schools that they needed to improve. And they did do so in both short-term aspects and things that had long-term outcomes for kids. The test score screen leads to the prioritization of who needs the most support in schools. And particularly, it's driven by a school inspection process where the final rating is determined by school inspectors that become on-site for schools. They look at things like teaching quality, leadership, and the capacity to improve within the school. They should be conducted by an apolitical, nonpartisan body that the state could either contract out or use internal resources. They should use a structured rubric to monitor test scores, evaluate school quality for particular groups of students, and make sure that all students are getting a high-quality school. There's evidence from the UK and other places that this can lead to meaningful differentiation, and it can meet ESSA's requirements around subgroups of looking at particular groups of students. Perhaps most importantly, school inspections would provide a clear roadmap for how schools can improve.
Okay. That was so fast. I was caught off guard there. All right. Sorry about that. My goodness. Okay. All right. So one of the key elements of Chad's proposal is this idea of school inspectors. Tony, you want to ask Chad a bit about that?
First of all, Chad, you get to love it for brevity. I guess you in a sense answered my question because you did say that SEAs could contract out the inspections.
Yes, so I ran the numbers looking at a report from 2012 from Craig Gerald, and he estimated how much school inspectors would cost. And states could pay for that with their 7% Title I set aside. And that would almost cover it for every state.
Sure. I mean, it's important because my question to you is how many SEAs really have the internal capacity to do anything that resembles high quality?
My preference would be for them to externally contract it and manage that contract in a high-performing fashion.
With a group like Bellwether Education Partners, is this just an infomercial? Have you just hijacked my event, Chad?
There are external providers that have done this for cities like New York City, or for some charter schools that also contracted for their particular, CMOs do it for particular schools to inspect.
Any particular models you thought about?
I looked at the UK model. That's very strong. They have, like I mentioned, they have a meaningful differentiation of how they analyze their schools. There's the New York City model also has something to be looked at and it's something to be gained from. And states like North Carolina have also used it for improvement purposes.
Joanne, you had some questions?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you if you've looked at what the potential unintended consequences of these inspections are. Like, what's the plus side and what's the downside that people need to be careful about?
Yeah, the plus side is that it is an external, I would say actually it's two sides of the same coin. So it's an external review, and so it hinges on schools trusting that as someone that they should trust and follow the recommendations of. Because ESSA doesn't actually give states power to determine what interventions are in low-performing schools, the schools themselves need to pick it out, and so they have to trust that the inspections are going to lead to a roadmap for them to actually implement it going forward.
Charlene, any questions?
I do actually.
We use the mic over there. How about that?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I did have a question about the inspectors, because you did say that it was important for those to be apolitical people.
No.
And perhaps.
Sorry. All right. Check.
Oh.
That might be mine, though. Get
Okay.
There you go.
Oh, look at that. Okay, so my question is, when you talked about having apolitical inspectors, is that really possible? And don't you think inspectors potentially run the risk of maybe leading to standardization or essentialization?
It's a good question. I think the apolitical nature of it would help by having an external body. You could have some sort of review or oversight body of it. Also, by having it separated from the traditional State Department of Ed, I think it would help a lot to say that they're not appointed, they're not overseen by them, and they could report to the legislature, for example, as opposed to reporting to the Department of Ed. So I think that those would help address some of the political concerns.
And Chad, how, these indicators of student success that your inspections would be part of, a lot of people have asked, well, those are supposed to be things that you can break down by the various subgroups. So how do you handle that in an inspection? When the inspection would come in and they would give a rating for the school or say how the school's doing, how would you handle that subgroup issue?
Yeah, the UK model has a look at particular low-performing groups, and so any state could structure their rubric to ensure that they were looking at their subgroups and to ensure that all students were getting a good quality school delivered to them.
Okay. All right. We're going to vote in a moment. Chad, you give 30 seconds to, again, summarize. What are the main points you want people to remember when they're voting, the best parts of your design here?
So test scores used as a flag or a screen over-identify schools for improvement, and then use experts, professional inspectors to give schools a roadmap for how to improve going forward.
Okay, you heard it. Very good. Okay, we're going to vote in a moment. Let's show the screen, Ellen, on how this is going to work. Okay. All right, go to www.govote.at.
Do they show up right as that?
Yeah, go ahead. You can sit down. All right. You're going to enter. We've got this code again. Oh, we can't quite. There it is. Okay, 40 53 53. It's really fun. Come on, guys, do it. If you've got your phone, you got to give this a try. Here and at home. All right.
You have to give us permission.
Okay, we're going to give you permission. No problem. There we go. Voting is okay. Let's see if that works. It works. Oh no, hate it. Somebody hated it right out the back. Ouch. Ouch. Here it comes. Ooh, this is fun to watch. Look at this in real time. Oh.
Look at that.
This is a little bit like watching the returns last night, except more movement. Okay. We're going to give you a few more minutes, then we're going to hear, a few more seconds, we're going to hear from our judges. Okay, it looks like we're pretty stable here. A lot of likes. Not too many love it. Some hates. Some people hate it. I wonder why. Looks like at least one person thinks it would be illegal. Let's go to our judges. Andy, starting with you. What are you going to give it?
Is this on or off?
It should be green. You want it to be green. Let's see. All right. Boy, technical promise. All right, we're good. We're good. Use that one.
Great. So I work with Chad, so I'm biased, so I would definitely say love it. No matter what, I think he's awesome. My only real question about this, though, is, and you're going to hear this with regard to another presentation that happens, I am deeply skeptical of experts to solve technical problems that we say are technical that may not be. So there's going to be another presentation that goes about the same idea of outsiders doing it, but uses a totally different non-expert community model. So it's for all of you to decide, but I'm just skeptical of experts, technical experts on this.
Okay, he says love it, but he doesn't really mean it. Okay, Joanne. What's
I am in the like it, I might even say like it plus category. I think it's a huge improvement over what most states are doing now.
Yeah, and it sounds like you would think the Department of Education should have no legal problems with it.
Correct.
Okay. All right, Arlene.
I am also a like it, a little bit skeptical, so I'd say almost like minus about the role of outside observers, only because, out in Arizona, those can be really interesting people. So I'm in the like it minus.
That's the problem.
And this sounds a little bit like charter school authorizers. So, some charter schools love their authorizers and most don't. Okay. And Tony Bennett, where do you come down, Tony? I'm counting on you to be Simon here.
Well, I'm going to be a like it.
Wah, wah. All right.
But I got to tell you, I have gotten better, but there was no rating. I mean, to me, you have to tell people how schools perform. And I just think you really fell short there. I do appreciate the fact that you agree that you need someone maybe outside the department to do the evaluations, but I didn't find a school rating. And I would tell you, for me to love it, I have to know that someone is telling me how schools perform.
You want A to F or something like it.
Yeah, I want A to F.
All right. Okay. All right. Yeah. Excellent. Very well done. We've done our first one. Give yourselves a round of applause. More or less on time. Next up, we have from America Succeeds, Dale Chu. We have no music. It's on our music. It is? I can't hear it.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Dale Chu with America Succeeds. Just a quick plug about our organization. We're a network of business-led organizations impacting nearly 5 million students nationwide. Our goal is to turn business leaders into education champions. We're currently expanding and we'll be in 20% of the nation by the end of next year. But to our proposal, which brings me to our design, which is grounded in 3 core principles. The first is the power of choice. For us, this means the primacy of college, but choice is key. Every student should be ready for college if they want to go. The second, floors not ceilings. The state's role is to set minimum standards under No Child Left Behind. Proficiency in reading and mathematics inadvertently became the ceiling. And finally, total fitness. We believe there's a real opportunity with ESSA to look across a broad spectrum of indicators and outcomes. Our stakeholders in the business community report the need for soft skills like teamwork and problem solving. And our hope through this model is to provide local flexibility for schools and districts to look and to think outside the box and also to play to their strengths, to what their communities value and what their communities cherish. As a quick example, in Colorado, there's a town called Manitou Springs. And in Manitou, they decided they wanted every student in their district to be able to play an instrument. So rather than having music as a special, it's actually part of the core curriculum. So every student in Manitou has music 5 days a week. So if that district wants the state to evaluate them, in part based off their music program, why shouldn't the state permit that to happen? Our construct is really based on a tight, loose one with maximum flexibility at the school level. The SCA may need to be tight at certain times because in our model, we envision the LEA acting somewhat like a charter authorizer. And with that, very quickly, the key features of our model. First, performance contracts. Like I said, the LEA is a charter authorizer. We envision the performance contract between the SCA and the LEA, and perhaps even, in fact, between LEA and schools. Second, we have a DMV model where the LEA has the choice in meeting minimum requirements. Analogous to if any of us went to the DMV and wanted to get a driver's license, usually there's a menu of options. The amount of choice you have, though, is dependent on past performance via an earned autonomy model. We have all the required indicators under ESSA, but we also have 5 additional indicators with multiple measures which can be chosen by the school and the LEA. Finally, our summative rating is an A through F. Apparently, both Michelle Rhee and today Diane Ravitch really love A through F. So there clearly is something there. What we think is interesting about our model is that the plus minus is used to signal improvement trajectory. So for example, you could have a situation where a family might choose a C plus school over a B minus school. And with that, hand it back over to Ryan.
You spent all those minutes advertising America Succeeds. That was your problem. But Tim Taylor, if you're out there somewhere, do note that. That was well done. Okay. A lot to cover in there. And again, it's one of the key innovations in Dale's and Eric's model here is this mix and match approach to say that not every school grade is going to be driven by the exact same set of indicators. In fact, you would let districts to choose which among a menu of indicators to use. Let's go first on this one to Charlene. Ask your question.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm really intrigued by this idea of choice, including soft skills, the business community, et cetera, measures of culture and satisfaction, which is in your written proposal. I don't think you got to talk about that much. A concern I have, though, is really thinking about this idea of setting and meeting goals. And what do you think is the risk of schools just deciding to go for that low-hanging fruit, the stuff that's easy for them to be able to do?
Certainly, that's always a possibility. Part of our model is the state is assuming good motive without being naive, right? Certainly, one of the criticisms of accountability under No Child Left Behind was the state basically said, we're evaluating on these things. And we all know implementation is the sticky wicket. And so we feel like if there's going to be a chance for it to really be successful, there needs to be buy-in at the local level. And we feel like choice is probably one of the biggest levers you can pull to provide that. But your question is a great one. That's definitely something that would definitely need to be worked out.
Okay, Andy?
Okay, so no one in their right mind would watch a baseball game and say that the pitcher, the person throwing the ball, participating in the game, should also be the one who calls balls and strikes, adjudicating whether or not there was success. Why should we have faith that the LEA, which is operating schools, should also serve the function of authorizing? So how can it both play the game, operate schools, and be trusted to be the umpire, calling balls and strikes on whether or not they're successful?
So I follow your analogy, but in terms of the umpire piece, I'm not totally convinced, because this is where the SCA, I think, would need to play a role, right? The SCA has that tight relationship with the LEA, so it's not just the LEA just calling it how they want to see it across the board. I also feel like when you're looking at school performance, just generally, this is my experience working in 2 states, is that I could name for you the top 10 school districts and the bottom 10 school districts, pretty much without even looking at any sort of indicator. Regardless of what measure you have, at the tails, it was always essentially the same. But it's that middle group that I feel like there's some opportunity for innovation, and I feel like our proposal here is one mechanism to maybe push that forward.
Okay. Joanne, did you want to get in here with a question? You got a little extra time.
So I'd love for you to talk about some of the stuff that you didn't have a chance to and just kind of glossed over. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the LEA to school relationship works? Who picks what? Who oversees what? How do you envision that?
Great question. Really, most of our focus was on the SCA to LEA piece because that was the tight piece. We didn't necessarily call for the LEA prescribing a contract process with the school, though you could imagine that would be something that would arise. There are a lot of different ways that it could play out, but certainly the idea is that one idea is the school could pick the specific metrics, but the LEA might say, you know what, no, we don't feel like that particular metric should be one that you should pick, or they could say it the other way. But really, there's that flexibility between the LEA and the school, and then it's the SCA that works collaboratively with the LEA to make sure that there's some certain bar of rigor.
You know, I'm tempted to say we shouldn't be using those jargony words, SEA, LEA, but who are we kidding ourselves? Who's watching this thing right here, right? This is an ESSA accountability design competition. This is pretty wonky. Yeah. All righty. No, Tony, you and Dale, worked together for a long time, so you don't get to comment or ask him a question. It is now time for us to do the voting. Dale, have a seat. Great job.
That was bad. I was going to nail him.
Oh, were you? Oh, okay. Well, you can say that in your comments here. All right, we're going to be back to voting in just a minute. Ellen will open up the floor for the voting. Get those smartphones out. Okay, is it working? Yep, again, if this is your first time, govote.at, code 405353. Let's see. Okay, we're seeing a little more Lovitz. I think it would be illegal. Interesting. I wonder, because some people probably think that there should be a single accountability system. That means the same indicators for all schools. A lot of like-its, some hate-its. This is a polarizing one. Interesting. Okay, and about the same number of love-its as before. Interesting, but more illegals and certainly more hate-its. Okay, panel, let's do it. Let's start this time with Dr. Bennett. Tony, so what do you think?
If Andy could love his colleague, I have to love Dale because Dale was one of our top assistants. So I want to say that, probably one of the smartest guys I've ever worked with. I did love the proposal because A, it did rate schools. It had some very interesting and kind of intriguing ideas. Just one thing Dale said at the very end that really bothered me is when he talked about schools with their SEA. And that's what I was going to kind of jump on there, Mike, was what would happen if you had two, say, different demographic schools in the same district, and they chose different metrics? Would there be a potential civil rights complaint because you could be inadvertently holding children that are disadvantaged to a lower standard?
Interesting. Yeah. And
That was the one thing that bothered me at the very end that I was going to kind of jump on.
And probably confusing for parents as well.
Yes.
Okay, Charlene. Oh, you're supposed to hold up your placard. Did you hold it up?
Hey.
There you go. All right, good. Charlene.
Okay, so using the same plus minus that you mentioned, I'm a love it minus. And the reason for that is that I'm intrigued by the idea of choice and flexibility. This proposal really stood out as something different. So I'd like to explore the ideas. I think we raised some of the potential problems.
Okay, and they definitely were trying. Okay, we'll go quick. We got Joanne, quickly.
In my attempt to play Simon,
Oh, hates it.
that's a little
We
strong.
always do this about you,
It's a little
Joanne.
strong.
This is it.
I totally love the design objectives, and I think the customization idea is a good idea. I just think that the capacity in the system is so weak that this isn't implementable, and we won't be able to administer it, and we'll end up with incentives that are gamed and conspire to dumb down the incentives instead of raise the bar for kids.
Do you think it's allowable under the law?
It's really complicated.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's illegal, but it's complex.
Okay, and Andy?
So this was actually one of my favorites of all 10 that I read. I am full bore in love with this. You ought to read it because there were some things in here that he didn't get a chance to talk about. The most interesting thing I thought, even though I asked a tough question about it, is this idea of historically states have just delegated school operations to district and then like accountability-wise try to recapture it with big data systems. This idea of having the state delegate operation to districts and then through some other mechanism like a charter-like performance contract with schools is a way that the state can both allow people to run schools and make sure schools are well run. This is a really clever idea, and I'm hopeful that a bunch of states are going to take them up on this offer.
All right, very well done. Big round of applause for Dale Chu and his partner Eric Laram. Now, everybody, we have from Arizona State University and Twitter, Sherman Dorn. Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Glad to be here. And as an individual faculty member from ASU, and if you read my proposal and thought you have everything in there but the kitchen sink, I will have to fight you because the kitchen sink is in fact in there. You just haven't looked for it deeply enough. So 3 fundamental issues. I guess the indents didn't quite work. One is a combination of measures, so no one individual measure had too much weight and therefore distorted incentives too much for schools and for school districts. Second is an incentive for long-term ambitions. The example I gave is alumni measures for students after they leave elementary school. What do they do both academically and in other ways in middle school in the next couple of years? And third, some measure of citizen judgment. And the example that I highlight here is the use of grand jury mechanisms to identify schools that have particularly low performing and also high performing treatment of equal opportunity in terms of vulnerable subgroups. If you want to take a look at the mandated ingredients for achievement and growth in terms of academics, 2 things in my proposal. One, I leave no proficiency rate untouched. Everything gets transformed. Everything actually you can do in an Excel spreadsheet in what I propose, but it's not the specifics that matter so much as I think that you need to do some transformation. Otherwise, what we saw with the perverse incentives with proficiency rates will reoccur. Second, and this I want to highlight, is that in a couple of places, I talk about highest and lowest performing vulnerable subgroup or highest and lowest gaining vulnerable subgroup because I think schools should be given an incentive to do well with vulnerable populations and yet still be held accountable for all of them. In terms of the last required element, English language proficiency, I think Access it looks to be the best assessment available, and again, I transform it for a couple of reasons. And then in terms of sort of the spices, the individual elements that aren't required, I suggest Bob Pianta's class observation instrument for primary grade instructional relationships, parent-student surveys, and again, some alumni measures. Putting it all together, I think of it as a stew for a couple of reasons. One, because of all the ingredients that go into it, but more so because a number of the measures that I propose stretch beyond 1 year. Either they are lagged measures or they require a couple years to accumulate. And I'm not sure whether or not the regulations are going to allow that. That's an open question. And with that, hungry for any additional information?
Well done.
Well done, indeed. An excellent use of clip art. I'm not sure that was part of the, the criteria, but we like that. Tony, you go first. I know you're a huge fan of this grand jury idea, right?
Sherman, as really the champion of bad rhetoric, what makes you think that the idea of saying you're going to grand jury schools has anything positive or good to come out of it?
One, citizen judgment. No one will be able to take a look at those ratings and say it came out of a brain-dead algorithm. Two, it's an existing mechanism that's been around for a couple of centuries. Three, yes, it will be challenging to implement, but if you have it regionally within a state, some grand juries are going to do a check-off thing, and some are going to be thoughtful, and the thoughtful ones will gain attention.
So, Mike, I have to ask my other question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you'll allow.
Yep.
First of all, I think it's a regulatory mess. I think it's a statutory and regulatory mess what you're proposing. But the second thing is that you make a comment that labels aren't really for anything other than motivation.
Not.
That's what it says here, isn't it? It says there is little persuasive evidence that the form of labels has mattered much beyond that of human motivation.
We're going to disagree about issues such as A through F labeling. We're just going to disagree about it.
Well, I just wondered who goes to schools and who teaches in schools. Are they SEALs or what?
They're human beings,
okay,
like you and me.
Okay, I guess that was the end of that conversation. I was kind of waiting for that to go somewhere. We have established that we're not SEALs. Okay, yeah.
That's fine.
That's a good way to end the argument.
I thought it was still going to go somewhere. All right, and I understand, Tony, that perhaps this notion of after the fact, changing grades after the fact is something that perhaps you have had some experience with. Whoa! You brought it up earlier. He can take it. He can take it. Come on. Well, nothing compared to the Associated Press. Give me a break. All right. Okay.
Exactly.
I'm going to change the subject.
Joanne.
Yes.
For those of you that don't know what we're talking about, you Google it later. Okay, Joanne.
Exactly. But not till after I say that I actually found the grand jury thing very intriguing. I think there's something to be said around the I found it intriguing. So, but my question is, you, in your presentation, you carefully glossed over a lot of the math by saying, I'm going to take these things and transform them, and then I'm going to take those things and transform them. Mm-hmm. And my question to you is, Chad gave us a proposal whose one of the core principles was simplicity so that everybody could understand it and figure out what it meant and where it came from, and every kid knows where they stand.
Although I couldn't understand it, I have to admit.
So other than my, yours is sort of the opposite extreme.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that continuum and where you fall on it and why?
Okay. First of all, I don't think that Chad's proposal is as transparent as he would like. In reality, depending on state assessment systems, it's going to take a lot of translation for any particular assessment system. Secondly, all of what I propose can be looked at and examined and calculated and simulated in an Excel spreadsheet.
But
In
what's
reality-
the purpose? Like,
Okay.
why are you
Okay.
doing the
But
transformation? What's the problem you're solving?
Okay, so let me give you an example. Trimmed means for English language proficiency. There are lots of debates about which students should be included or excluded. What a trimmed mean is it excludes the top and bottom 10 or 15% out of a range, which means we don't have to worry about those inclusion or exclusion. It still captures the central part of student performance in a school.
Okay, it is now going to be time for us to vote.
All right.
Sherman, great job. Round of applause for Sherman. Okay. Again, the system that does a lot of statistical manipulation to work out some of the issues that came up with No Child Left Behind, but also this idea of a grand jury that is going to get to look at all the evidence and help weigh in on these schools. So okay, let's see. How are we doing here? Woo! Sherman, you have pushed some buttons. This is good. I like it. But there are some that like it, a few that think it would be illegal. Okay. We have not had the illegal card thrown yet by any of the judges. We'll see if that happens here. Okay. All right. Not... okay, interesting. More hateds than we've seen before. Okay, let's start this time with Charlene, just for mixing things up. Okay. Charlene, what say you?
Well, gotta say I wanted to have some love for Arizona, but I hate it.
Oh, she hates it.
Specifically because as a teacher and administrator, oh, thank you. I will figure this out eventually. As a teacher and administrator, even on an Excel spreadsheet, this sounds like a nightmare to me. Like I'd need an extra 12 hours in my week in order to do this. Although I'm intrigued by the possibilities of the grand jury in terms of maybe family, community engagement, but overall hate it.
Okay, she hates it. Andy Smerick, what are you thinking?
Okay, so I love his tweeting. Everyone should follow him on Twitter. And I hate the term grand jury as well for the same reason that Tony brought up. I love the concept of citizens getting involved in whether or not their public schools are doing what the community wants them to. So that kernel, having non-technical expert weighing in on the virtues of the schools is great. The technical problems in it are very, very complicated. And to Tony's point of the inability to be clear about what success is and definitive concern me. So overall, I'm in the like category.
I like it. Okay, very good. Joanne, go ahead.
I'm going to go next because I agree with everything Andy said,
Good.
which made me vote intriguing.
Joanne,
Good.
you're not following along, huh? Oh, we had to follow your rules for years and years, but you're not going to follow mine. I see how it goes. Tony.
Sherman, let me count the ways. No ratings. I really had first of all, one of my criteria when I was going through these was it easy to explain or describe? And as a state leader, having to stand up in front of communities and try to describe an accountability system, I think you may as well be speaking Chinese. And I think the math behind it is very, very complicated. And I think, I always say if my dad doesn't understand it, it's not understandable. So, and that's not a condemnation of my dad. It's just I think we have to remember that when we do these things. So I just found this one to be far more than I could bite off.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Sherman. Well done. Next up, we have Josh Boots from Empower K-12, one of the people who designed the charter school accountability system here in Washington, D.C. that is in use. He's going to tell us how that can be applied to ESSA. Josh Boots, take it away. We got to work on that music, guys, a little faster.
You may not have heard of Empower K-12 before. We're a small nonprofit in DC that we support charter schools that aim to become more data-focused and data-driven. So given our background, for those of the people who are in the room, and some of the charter schools are here actually, it'll be no surprise that our design is very data-centric. We believe that state school accountability systems have two main goals. One is to provide information to the public about the school quality and to also identify schools and pair them with appropriate rewards, sanctions, and supports. Our proposed ESSA design encourages states to be innovative with the data they already have while pursuing the new creative metrics like the other ones that are proposed in proposals today. We focus in particular on student growth and student growth gaps, and we also offer an advanced data model to help match schools with the right state-supported systems. Here is an example of our public-facing comprehensive index score system. We embrace growth as measured by median growth percentiles, and we do an examination of growth gaps between high and low achieving subgroups. The lower the growth gap, the higher the score. Our overall growth and growth gap scores combine to make 60% of the whole total score. Again, we are focused on growth. And then we also have a measure for English language proficiency and growth, and a behavior measure that looks at suspensions as an indicator. We don't think that this is necessarily the best indicator for students, for school environment, but it is a measure that is collected annually by the Department of Ed and has historical data that states can use while looking at and exploring other valid and reliable measures of school environment. And we also look at achievement growth and achievement gaps as typically are done. And then that way we also give half credit for students who are not meeting the college and career ready. Full credit for those who are meeting it and half credit for those who are not meeting it. This school here, and in their example, is kind of like an average school, and we think a great school would have an index score of 70. In terms of our proposal of our advanced model, we would take the index scores and we would take a slew of additional data that we have about schools and combine them into one comprehensive data model. And looking at whether a school would be likely to be great in the next 3 years. Think Moneyball, or think I guess as Sherman put them, brain dead algorithms of Google and Amazon. But we'd be using all the data that we have about schools to project whether they're going to be great in the future. And we believe that projecting whether they're going to be great in the future allows schools, or allows the state to actually identify and better align their policies and programs with the school's true needs. Imagine a data-driven accountability model that provides specific, tangible next steps to the schools that are struggling and identify schools who are beating the odds, so we can study and then identify what other data elements we should be collecting about these great schools who are beating the odds. So we hope our designs focus on student growth, and a data-driven model will help states better support school environment, and we thank Mr. Petrelli and Fordham Institute and the judges for being here to present today.
All right, well done, Josh. Very good. Boy, Tony brought up his dad. You just brought up my dad, Mr. Petrelli. What was that? All right. Okay, Andy.
Well, my dad is also watching at home. Hi, Dad. Hi, Mom.
Oh, excellent. Which is why you're not going to throw your dad under the bus like Tony
Yes,
did.
they should be the first two Lovitts that come up.
Yes, and he would be able to, I bet your dad could understand Sherman's.
Yes. He was a math teacher.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so he would, actually, yeah. Okay. All right. We won't count this time against you. Andy.
Okay, so
Mr. Charter Guy, this is a proposal ripped from one of the best charter accountability systems in the country. So what's your take here?
ish. So I wanted to love it, but I think that schools do a whole lot of things other than test scores. Citizenship, passing on communities' values, they're historically important, and on and on and on. Sherman's line about brain dead algorithms is echoing in my ears. This is really, 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 really algorithmic, really data heavy. It's like we have computerized our schools. Can you give me any confidence that this is more than schools are just, kids are more automatons, they are more than just the generation of achievement data?
Yeah, saying that his Twitter handle is data nerd. Okay,
yeah,
this is
that's fine. I think that while focus on growth is really less about just achievement, but also when we were looking at the regulations and what to do on, we love the PMF and the Public Charter School Board, and that it looks like so it's the performance management framework for the charter schools, and it includes additional indicators around student re-enrollment rates. It includes attendance and class observations from the University of Virginia. So we believe that these are all great elements. It's just how do states do that at states that are bigger than DC at a wide level in a valid and reliable way. And so we came to the conclusion, like, that's really hard to do. So temporarily, we only have a couple of measures, but we think that an index score system that includes additional measures that are valid and reliable and can be done at a statewide level are important and should be included. And we would include them in our index model and then ultimately include them as part of how are we projecting a great school in the future and then aligning those state supports to the appropriate schools.
And this was something that many of the designs, really almost all 26 of them, had a lot of this focus on saying, here are the data, the indicators we're going to use to grade schools, but we're going to have another set of indicators that we're also going to report on report cards because we think they're important information. Maybe they're not totally fully baked yet, or we're not quite sure if they're valid and reliable yet, or we're still working them out, so they don't get bumped up to that tier. Yeah. Can I ask you one question, Josh? Another thing that a lot of people did, including you, was on the proficiency piece, on the academic achievement piece. You were saying we're not going to just look at the proficiency, literally at the proficiency rates at proficient. We're going to give partial credit for basic or advanced credit for advanced. Why is that important?
Well, so looking at, in DC we take the PARC, and so we looked at students on the PARC assessment and that they needed to be roughly at about the 60th to 70th percentile nationally to be at that college and career ready level 4 benchmark. And while we want all of our kids to be at that benchmark, it's going to take a while to get there. So if we are only focusing on level 4 students, we worry about whether schools actually are just focusing on bubble kids getting up to the top, while we really want, if they're not at college and career ready, to at least be approaching those standards and at the next level down. So wanting to encourage schools to get their students at that point as well.
Okay, very well said. Big round of applause for Josh Boots. Thank you. We're going to do our voting. Again, as Andy said, a very data-heavy model on this one, but a big focus on growth and a big focus on making sure that the schools are focused on all kids, not just the bubble kids. The voting is now open. Boy, somebody is fast off the mark with their hated every time. Very impressive. I guess they're motivated. All right, who should we start with this time? We're going to start with Joanne. Okay, let's give it a little more time. Like it, love it, hate it. Think it would be illegal. Okay. This one, interesting. Interesting patterns that come up here. Not as many hate it, not as many love it. People like it. Okay, Joanne, tell us what you think.
I'm in the like it category. There we go. I'm in the like it category as well. I very much like the growth emphasis. I don't think the behavior section is rich enough, and I do think there are some ways, even if it's not valid and reliable, to get the things that matter to be on the scoreboard. And the one thing that I worry a little bit about is will the school be great in the future metric is a really interesting one, but the thing I'm more interested in is the school improving, and what can we do through the accountability system that incents schools to continuously improve? So it's not so much the money ball, like will it be great, it's what do we need to do to make it great? So it sort of was on its way to something I thought was great, but I'm not sure it got all the way there.
Okay, very well said. Charlene, we'll go with you next.
I'm going to go ahead and go with the love it. For similar reasons, actually. I really liked the idea of an innovative use of already existing data, and particularly looking at things that aren't always something that are examined in these kinds of accountability systems. In particular, I liked what we've been calling the soft data, looking at teacher retention, quality, student discipline data. So I'm really intrigued, and I'd like to see those details that Joanne was talking about.
Okay, Tony?
So I was a solid like it. Again, I love the idea of using growth. I was very intrigued by that. I would tell you that I was a little concerned there wasn't more proficiency. I would say had we had a little bit more proficiency in there, I could have gotten to a higher level. I would also tell you I just found it incredibly complicated and heavy. I mean, I was tired reading this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was probably the most sophisticated of all of them, and my technocratic, like government worker, central administrator side loved the heck out of this. Like, this makes a whole lot of sense from the point of view of someone at the top of a system who needs to make sense of a bunch of things centrally. My concern is that there would be a whole lot of teachers, a whole lot of parents who would see their scores kicked out of the system and not feel that their school and their community was at all reflected in what the algorithm produced, which concerns me. So I'm in the like it category.
Okay, very well done. Round of applause for Josh and for our judges. All right, next up, I'm very excited to introduce Lydia Burns and Jamie Smith from the Student Voice team of the Pritchard Committee for Academic Excellence, high school students from Kentucky. Take it away.
Hello, it is such an honor to be with you today. We are here on behalf of the, We are here on behalf of the Pritchard Committee Student Voice Team, a self-selected group of about 90 middle school, high school, and college students from across Kentucky. We work to amplify and elevate the voices of Kentucky's young people to improve public schools. And that pretty much explains how 2 high school students ended up on this stage here with some of the likes of the most brilliant education policy experts in the country. But that's enough about us. Let's drive straight into the wonkery. So here's the 2-minute highlights of our proposal. Okay, so the first objective in our design is to create a holistic view of school quality that isn't entirely based on academics. The Handbook of Economics of Education states, school accountability measures are most effective when they identify what a school is contributing to students and not what students are contributing to a school. We also acknowledge that accountability systems by themselves do not have the ability to increase student achievement or growth. It is in the hands of educators to inspire actual learning. So in the spirit of ESSA and localized control, we wanted to create a system that would provide stakeholders with the information they need to better their school systems with data that is targeted and helpful. So our indicators for achievement and growth are academic proficiency, which would be calculated based on the percentage of 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students scoring at or above proficiency in math and ELA assessments, student progress over time, which would be calculated using student growth percentiles, and schools would be awarded points for students making adequate and exceptional growth on yearly assessment, and closing performance gaps, which would be tracked by the growth of 4 historically at-risk subgroups, including English language learners.
Educational policy is built around a single group of stakeholders, students. The reason we have accountability systems at all is to ensure students are receiving a quality education. Our proposal allows students to speak for themselves, or we could say speak for ourselves, instead of relying on numbers alone to indicate a school's success. Countless studies, including those of Dr. Ferguson at Harvard and Tripod, also featured here today, have shown the benefits of tracking school climate measures, especially during periods of institutional change. And worth noting here is that some of those studies have been conducted not simply with students, but also by them. When the Student Voice team conducted a student voice audit of a Kentucky middle school, we were able to see firsthand how a large disconnect between administrators, teachers, and students can affect in schools' overall functionality. We know student voice and agency matter in assessing the health and effectiveness of our schools, and that is why we feel so strongly about including student voices in our accountability system. A school's overall score will be calculated by the sum of its points earned. Schools will receive a raw score for each of the aforementioned indicators, which will then be converted into points. The overall score of a school will indicate which of the 4 ratings it will earn.
As students ourselves, we firmly believe that the best education policy is built with us and not around us. That is the heart of what we hope to convey by integrating student voice in our proposal. Thank you for reading it, and thanks for hearing us out.
Great job, great job. All right, well done. Well done. That was incredibly well done. Okay, let's start with Charlene. Questions?
Yeah, first of all, excellent presentation. And I really appreciated your point about the focus of all of this being students and student improvement. In fact, I think my question has to do with the after effects, which really is, yes, school climate's important, particularly as you mentioned during transition. My questions are 2. One is, what happens at schools that don't have the performance gap you're talking about? How does that fit into the whole system? And my second, do you want to answer that one first?
So in our design, we have outlined that for a school that doesn't have 20 students that are identified in one of the 4 subgroups that we laid out, that percentage that would be in student gap growth would then just go to regular growth. We modeled that off of Massachusetts and Tennessee systems.
Thank you. And my next question has to do with this idea at the end of, the interventions of a planning committee. I totally believe in student voice and teacher voice and community voice. I'm a little concerned about the idea, though, of this committee. It seems like too many cooks in the kitchen. What do you guys think about that?
They're representing the Pritchard Committee. I mean, this is, it kind of goes in their blood here. I think this is the important. Yeah.
That's a really good point. It's not really something that occurred to us. We based it off of Florida's 8-step system, and we think it's really important to have at least somewhat of a representation of a large variety of stakeholders.
I noticed that you talked a lot about the importance of those climate indicators, yet they only count for something like 6% of the score. So why is that? Why do you have it weighted so low?
We were really afraid that we would get the illegal scoring rating. Personally, we think those are really important, but we wanted to be legal.
That's not a problem up here. So.
We wanted to be legal. So we looked at the law a lot, and we found it really, really confusing. So I don't know if any of you guys wrote that, but it's really hard to understand. I don't actually have my high school diploma yet, so I needed a little help.
David Cleary, that one's for you out there. Okay, yes, all right.
I just wanted to make sure that it was feasible.
That's right. That the law makes it clear that these other indicators are supposed to count, quote, much more than the non-academic.
Pie in the sky. If you could put that percentage to be what you think it's worth, what would it be?
I would need to do more research.
Woo! Wow, people are going to love that on Twitter because yes.
Mike, can I ask just one question? In reading Index 4, School Climate, it's very heavily weighted towards students. Mm-hmm. Yet many of your parents are the reasons you're going to school where you go because they choose to live in the neighborhoods they live in before you ever went to school. So what about the use of parent surveys and even teacher surveys in your school climate?
That is actually something we played around with and was actually in the design until one of its very latest phases. The reason that we did that is because the indicator was weighted so smallly that we didn't want teacher voice and parent voice and all that stuff to so far outweigh student voice that it wasn't accounted for at all.
And because the students are the ones affected by all of the change that's made in the schools and by the accountability and the effectiveness of the system, we felt it was most important that their voices were heard over those other
we wanted to weight
stakeholders.
student surveys more heavily, but with how small it was, that just didn't happen.
Big round of applause for the students from the Student Voice Team Pritchard Committee for Academic Excellence. Awesome job, guys. Head on down. All right, we're going to vote. Now, don't go easy on them just because they're kids, okay? Come on. Whoever's been throwing that hate every time. No, just kidding. No, all right, get those phones out. Let's vote. By the way, this is such a great idea. I love the Pritchard Committee is a state-based education reform and policy organization in Kentucky. Such a great idea to have a student voice team. I think reform groups, unions, everybody involved in these should do the same. Okay, what do we see here? 2% of the people here are just churlish, unforgiving souls. I think it would be illegal. Why would it be illegal? I don't get that. Okay, half like it, half love it. Very positive. Okay, let's start. Tony, let's start with you.
So I have to tell you, your explanations put me over the top. When I read these and went through it, I gave it a definite like it, and I kept thinking I could love this if there were some clear indicators. And I have to tell you, it was the easiest one of the whole lot to explain. And I would also tell you that I love it from the perspective that Dale Chu, you would have been unemployed had these two ladies applied for a job when we were in the Department of Education. And to that, I just want to say our movement needs young people, smart, passionate young people like you. So don't ever get out of this business. Your efforts are worth it. Thank you.
Thank you. You're here. It really is feeling like American Idol. Excellent.
I am in the like it, but I agree, totally love the participation, civic involvement, interest. The reason I'm like it specifically is I am too much of an advocate of teacher and parent voice as well. Your explanation made a lot of sense to me, but I think that's where the research can be done to figure out where those voices can get added in as well.
Great. Joanne?
I'm in the love it category, and I loved it. I guess I was put over the top the same as Tony by your explanation because you actually answered a couple of the questions that I had. I think, for example, at the elementary level, you might be better off with parent surveys and at the high school level with student surveys, so I think there's some tweaks like that I might make to it. But I thought your answers were fabulous. I thought the thoroughness of the work you did was like outstanding. You can stand with any wonk in this room anytime. Trust me, your citations and the research you did were amazing, and I think you came up with something that is 100% legal. I wouldn't have worried at the margins that you did, and is really creative and thoughtful, and I love the way that you incorporated student voice, especially the open-ended comments, which you didn't talk about, but I thought that was very clever.
Okay, Andy.
So I also loved it. I thought you guys did great. Seriously, thank you for coming and for the work that you put into this. The only question I would raise is, I think collectively we have to think really hard about, I have a student who's in school, his name is Will, and he's 5 years old. And what that means, his voice in his school system should be a whole lot different than your voice in your school system. And I just think we're probably a couple years away from thinking about what student voice looks like in elementary school, middle school, high school. We can get there, but when I talk about how schools are a whole lot more than test scores, this has to be part of the algorithm we use. So
All
thanks.
right. Great job, judges. Great job, students. Very exciting. Love it. And coming up next, now you can start the music, Alyssa. This is it. We will start the music now. Okay, there we go. Okay, we're trying to get this timing down right here. Coming up next, we have Chris Hoffman and Rachel Mann from the Teach Plus Teaching Policy Fellows. Teach Plus, come on up from students to teachers. Woohoo! Nice. Okay.
So I swear I'm a teacher even though I'm a foot shorter than the high school students who are just up here. My name's Rachel Mann and this is Chris Hoffman, and we're here representing a group of teachers, but more importantly we're here representing our students that we work with every day. We created our proposal with two main goals in mind. The first being that we wanted one that was comprehensible for the people it impacted, for our students, for ourselves as teachers, and for our families. We believe that a system that's easy to understand is going to lead to true transparency and growth. Secondly, we need a system that not only accurately rates schools, but gives schools specific ways to improve, and that's why we created a two-tiered system of indicators.
As classroom teachers, when we look on the face of our students, we know what matters most. It's how they feel, it's what they learn, and it's how they grow. And for this reason, our three Tier 1 indicators focus on these three dimensions of school quality, specifically student growth, student learning, and school climate. Because our Tier 1 indicators measure what we value most, in a school, they will be the basis of our rating system. As classroom teachers, however, we understand that there's much more to a grade accountability system. It needs to identify not only schools' ratings, but also pathways to improvement. In our system, we want a system that is reflective, truly reflective. And as classroom teachers, we are constantly going back and taking a look at our lesson plans at the end of the day and trying to think to ourselves, what can we do to make it better? Our Tier 2 indicators are designed for this purpose. We need a school accountability system that will focus on these exact ideas. For instance, in our work, our Tier 2 indicators will be able to focus on student improvement and be able to focus on different ideas.
Our actual ratings are going to be coming from our three Tier 1 indicators, the first of which, student learning. We've all talked about proficiency. We know that proficiency is the goal of education, and we know that can be assessed using statewide annual assessments. It's our second two that really stem from our experience as educators. We chose student growth as one of our most important indicators because we recognize that the student who's reading 3 grade below level at the beginning of the year and only 2 grades below at the end has achieved a great deal. We also want to move our proficient students to advanced. And then our third category we've broken into two different categories, school culture and student attendance. So school culture, we understand that our students are not going to achieve the best that they can unless they feel welcome, safe, and engaged. And we agree with our students over here that that can only happen if we're asking the people who experience it, if we're asking our students through surveys, our families, and our teachers. And then lastly, and most importantly, we're going to look at attendance, because regardless of how meaningful and engaging your instruction is, it's really meaningless if the kids aren't there to experience it. So we want our schools to be looking at effective strategies for getting our chronically absent students into the classroom.
Our Tier 2 indicators
exist.
Nice.
Well played.
That was well played. That was very good. You do this for a living, don't you? Yes. Okay. All right, Tony.
Go right to the tier 2 indicators.
Yep, go right into it. Here we go.
He'd love to talk about them.
Yep.
I have without naming assessments, I guess I have a concern about using formative assessments that you cannot be assured are aligned to state standards in an accountability system. I think that could create a real problem, and I would really want you to address that because I think you pretty much advocate for that in your proposal. And the second thing is you mention attendance, and you mention a percentage of attendance, and having had to wrestle with this at the state and local level, I think that's going to require a state definition of attendance that schools must follow. And because I have seen districts play games with attendance rates before, so I just want you to talk about those two things.
Tony, you're calling for a common standard?
Who takes tier 2? Who takes
I'm for that.
All right.
I guess, well, first of all, the purpose of the two-tier system is really about driving improvement. When we're taking a look at trying to find out what are the most important things to improve school outcomes, we want to collect a wide amount of data, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a growth metric. We want to be able to collect things like, school to counselor ratio. We want to be able to collect information about home visit programs. And we want to see if those different tier 2 indicators positively impact student growth, student learning, and school climate. And if we see that over time, then we can make these evidence-based interventions. These will determine what we actually do in those schools.
And this is something, Chris, that you guys at KIPP have done in the past using these sorts of predictive analytics. That's where some of this comes from? Is that fair to say? Or
I wouldn't be privy to all that information,
okay.
maybe, but yes.
Yeah. Okay. Charlene?
Can I address what he said about attendance?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So thinking about attendance, I was one of the people who worked on that specific section. And I think a lot of that is we kind of want to put it out there as something to think about. And we know that that is going to be a conversation that has to be had. But I know looking at our students, like right now, for me personally on our grading for teachers, we get to write off students that aren't in attendance. I think it's like 20 days out of the year. They just don't count in our scores. So that's not fair and helpful to that student. So we really, again, want to be making schools think about how are we going to get the kids in the class. And we chose 95% because we're supposed to be testing 95% of our students. So 95% of our students need to be in school was why we picked that specific percentage. But we also understand that that is a conversation that still needs to be had, and we need to look into it.
So Joanne and I were
more.
just talking about this. I wouldn't worry about your proposal. I don't think that one thing you said was legal. That writing off to your kids.
Oh, about what? About not allowing their scores to count.
But for the
right.
teacher personal
Right.
score, not
Right.
for the school
Okay.
score, but for my teacher's score,
Okay.
those
All
kids
right.
get written
I'm
off.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Charlene, real quick, one last question.
Yeah, I think what I'm really intrigued by a lot of what you're saying, but I think there's some real deficit language underlying it. One of the questions I have is, with the populations of students you're talking about, I'm not sure having predictive testing in order to have more testing really makes a lot of sense. And I think, especially as teachers, I would ask, aren't there better kinds of ways to formatively assess students and predict success?
I think we completely agree. When we are focused on these tier 2 indicators, we're mostly thinking about many of the resource equity ideas. When we're looking, specifically at, as I said before, home visit programs. The beauty of our system is that if you can identify that high-performing schools have strong evidence of home visit programs, then you can drive time, energy, and resources towards those ends.
Okay, please thank Chris and Rachel and the Teach Plus Teaching Fellows for the great presentation. Way to go, guys. Yes. We're going to open up the voting. That was fantastic. By the way, this was not easy just to get to be here. Of course, they had to find substitute teachers and get permission, et cetera, et cetera. Appreciate the effort that you made.
That counted against her attendance rate, didn't it?
Yeah, there you go. It is true, by the way, a lot of proposals talk about chronic absenteeism as something that they focus on. So this question, is it better to look at chronic absenteeism or better to look at just an attendance rate? And how do you do that? Okay, voting is open. Here it comes. Go vote. Chris and Rachel and Teach Plus. Should also put in a plug for the Viva project that helped us find Charlene. It's so great. Again, it's great having these student voice groups, great having these teacher voice groups out there. Okay. Really? Is this it? I mean, oh, it's not working. Oh no. Ellen, any idea why? Can we reboot it? Do you want to try to, let's see. at least two people's worked. Let's see. Oh, there it is. There it is. Now it's working. Okay. Oh, interesting. 56% like it. 28% love it. Not too many hate it. Okay. And a few do think it's illegal. All right. Let's start. I can't remember. We'll start with Andy this time around. Get yourself organized.
Okay. I was almost in the love it category, but I was more in, just barely in the like it category. The stuff I would point out that I like the most is it forced me to think more about, in an accountability system, what are the measures that should be used for accountability purposes, and what are the measures that should be used for transparency purposes? Things just to inform those involved for formative reasons, and also just the general public. So that was great. But also, they didn't get much time to talk about some of these school culture indicators in here, which are terrific. Some of the best I saw overall, which kind of gets at my concern about not being too technocratic. So almost love it.
Okay, Joanne?
So I'm in the like it category as well. I also liked the two-tiered system where the second tier is designed to really diagnose and drive improvement. I think there's a few more proposals coming up that had a similar idea, maybe executed in a slightly different way, but I think that's a very intriguing idea for states to think about. The other thing that I thought was interesting in this is that almost nobody is looking at doing direct measures of student growth. Everybody is taking these proficiency measures and looking at them across years to try to figure out if there's growth, and I really like the fact that you guys were trying to take growth across grade spans, not the way that we've been defining it under NCLB, and use it as the growth measure. I don't think NWEA is the right way to do it, but I liked the idea that you're trying to actually really measure student growth.
Okay, Charlene?
Well, I will also like it for very similar reasons. The part that almost dropped me into the hate it was looking at the computer-based testing. And certainly as a classroom teacher, as a mom and administrator, that just gives you the same kind of data you already get. So I love the two-tier system. I love the school culture pieces. I think if we're going to push on that as teachers, let's actually push on it and not just use something that's already there.
Okay.
So I was a little bit in the kind of Sybil thing with this. I like it, I hate it, I like it, I hate it. So I went into the kind of, I barely liked it. And I thought there were great ideas. I think, what we've talked about were great ideas. I just didn't, and I think Joanne may have used this comment, I just didn't think they were fleshed out enough or baked enough for me to really believe that this was doable the way you've got it outlined. So I'm still a little hung up on the NWEA piece and alignment as well as the attendance piece.
All right. Thank you, judges, and thank you, Chris and Rachel, again. Well done. Whew. Heading into the home stretch here, people. This is good. Whew. Okay. Next up, we've got, representing their colleague Morgan Polikoff, we've got Stephanie Rabel and Matthew Duke. Did I just butcher both of your names? Yes. Okay, which ones? Okay, Stephanie and Matthew from University of Southern California and the Baltimore County Public Schools. We have music for them? I can't hear the music from way up here. It's going? There we go. That's it. That's what we're talking about. What? He's sending me off the stage. All right, Stephanie. Matt.
Do we need mics, or we're good without? 2 mics.
Okay, we have two main objectives with this design. The first is to improve outcomes for all students, both academic and non-academic. So research has shown that consequential accountability systems have been successful in raising student achievement, so our proposal continues in that vein. But also one of the criticisms of NCLB was that it focused almost exclusively on test scores and ignored other outcomes of schools that we know are important and that we value, so we included some non-academic outcomes. Our second objective is fairness, and this is fairness to teachers and schools. So we try to avoid any measures that are correlated with student demographics.
All right. So our first indicator of performance is an achievement measure, and this makes 2 improvements upon NCLB. First, we're looking at all tested subjects, not just math and English language arts. And second, we're giving schools for credit for all students along the continuum, and not just those students right around the state's proficiency cutoff. We do this by transforming students' scores on the state assessments to a 0 to 100 scale, and then we take that and we create a measure of how the student on average is doing in the school, and then we also look at the subgroup performance. And in this measure, we're actually accounting for different sizes in subgroups, making sure that one school isn't necessarily held for a subgroup that is very small when the performance of another subgroup is much, much different. Our second measure of performance is a growth measure. We're basing this off of some research that I actually think was published at Fordham, or with Fordham, that looks at a two-step value-added model. And this model is strong because it actually eliminates the relationship between student demographics and what schools are contributing to a school's or to a student's learning. We do this growth measure for all grades and subjects for which we can calculate a growth score, and then we report it again for the whole school and as a subgroup measure. Two other things we're looking at are English language learners, and we're giving credit for two things. One, improvement in proficiency over time, and the reclassification rates of students to proficient. And then we have another system of indicators for school and student success, and we're looking at 5 things: absenteeism, a survey of student engagement, disciplinary rates, on-time grade promotion to grades following elementary school, as well as then access to a full curriculum, which includes all of the core subjects, as well as then physical education and the arts.
So while we do not propose to have a single rating, whether we have, we have 4 ratings here, and each are from a scale of 0 to 100. With the exception of the ELs category, there are an average of the whole school rating and subgroups rating. The achievement and growth ratings would be used to identify low-performing schools, while the ELs and other categories would be used to diagnose problems or target interventions for these low-performing schools.
Okay. Well done. Well done. Round of applause. Round of applause. Okay, very nicely done. I'm going to start with Tony. I know he has a question about the two-step VAM. I've seen you do the two-step VAM, Tony, in your cowboy boots. You're very good at it.
I do it to that song. What does the gadfly say?
Yes, good. Good answer. Google that one too if you don't know about it. Okay, Tony.
I just want to know when that's going to be the lead-in music. So, preferring student growth percentiles. I find VAM trying to talk about it with educators, trying to talk about it with people to be a black box. So how do you take a black box and then make a 2-tiered black box out of it?
So the research that we're using, they look at student growth percentiles as well. They also look at a one-step value-added model. And the reality is that they provide similar information. The difference is that what the two-step does is it removes all of that correlation, right? The relationship between a student's background characteristics and what a school is contributing. So yes, it's much more technical, I get that, but the idea is that it's able to sort of elicit just what a school is doing for particular students.
One last thing, Mike, if I may, you seem to have what I would consider to be a really heavy weight on what I consider to be non-academic factors. And I think we are now in an era where we're trying to thread that needle. I think I'm a little concerned that you may have gone overboard to the non-academic side.
A well-rounded curriculum that's not academic? Is that what you're
I didn't say that.
All right. Just want to make that clear. All right, yeah.
So talk a little bit about that. And again, you had the issue with attendance as well, trying to define attendance. So, but go ahead.
So just for clarity, you're asking, you think we are too much on academics and not enough?
No, non-academics. I thought there was some unless I read it wrong.
Sure. So achievement and growth are the 2 measures that we're using to identify the lowest performing schools. So they are still heavily driven by academics, but we're using those other indicators of performance to identify where schools need interventions and supports for improvement that will then help those things like achievement and growth in the future.
See, Tony's a simpleton, so he missed that
I must have gotten through, went over my head.
Yeah, all right, just kidding. Joanne?
And also for Tony's benefit, you don't have an A through F or any similar combined score. So you end up with 4 different scores, and you expect people to be able to look at 4 things and figure out what they mean. I personally think that's not crazy, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So we didn't combine the measures because we didn't want to mask one particular area by high performance or low performance in another. And so by providing a 0 to 100, which research says the public can understand what a 0 to 100 means, we're providing them a full scope of what is happening in a school, and we think that people at minimum are smart enough to look at 4 numbers and sort of say, they're doing great in a growth measure, but they maybe need some help in areas like English language proficiency.
And then you're just using on your chart, it would be the first two, the gold and the green, are the two that are used to figure out which schools are low performing and require interventions, and the other two are used to
identify what those interventions.
diagnose problems and figure out what the interventions ought to be in that particular school. Unless the English learners are particularly low, in which case.
Also correct.
Yeah, okay, great, thanks.
Okay, thank you both very much. Stephanie and Matthew, great job. We're going to do our voting. Now, I am biased on this point. I do like this idea of saying we can handle more than one rating. Parents, we get report cards. We get, 5 or 6 different grades at once. We can handle it. Even Tony's dad can handle it.
Yeah, he always appreciated my report card.
All right. We'd like to hear about that report card sometime. Okay, the voting is open. It looks like it is working. How are we doing? A lot of love-its. Many, many love-its this time around. Not too many think it would be illegal. Interesting. Let me ask a quick question. I put Joanne on the spot again because you've been most recently in the department. This idea of using scale scores instead of proficiency rates, you think that counts? That would be okay? The language in the law mentions academic achievement indicators of proficiency or something like that.
Yeah, but I think the way they did the achievement thing accomplishes that.
Okay. All right, Tony, let's start with you.
So I have to say I liked it after, and I would tell you I liked it after your explanations. Your explanations were excellent. I think you answered the questions, and I think I was trying to, as I've said before, I was trying to view this as you were presenting this to a community or a school, and I think you did an outstanding job presenting how that would work. So I liked it.
Okay, Charlene.
I'm in the Levitt category. This is one of the proposals with your explanation that kind of hit all of my particular framework pieces. And the other reason I'd really like to advocate for loving it is that if any of this gets taken to more conversations, I think it will benefit the whole. I love, as a school leader, having something that's more complicated and comprehensive than just here's your watered down, don't really know what it means score.
Okay, excellent. So keep those individual ratings. By the way, the department, that's one thing they may have to figure out is, do you require states to mush all these indicators together into a single rating or not? They could they could probably interpret the law that way, but maybe they don't have to. Joanne?
Yeah, I'm in the Levitt category as well. I particularly liked the non-academic indicators, like the specific non-academic indicators that were picked here, I thought were really interesting. So for those of you who haven't read it, it's things like student engagement and happiness. Like, who doesn't like that? And there's an equity measure, there's an opportunity to learn measure. So there's some really good metrics in here that I think are worth looking at.
Okay. Andy?
So I am barely in the like it, but a strong like it category. The stuff that, two things I want to just point out particularly good. This idea of the 0 to 100, transforming like these proficiency rates and like the bands into this very intuitive way, both so people can understand it, but then also so you can measure growth of all students is great. Also this idea of not having a summative A through F grade, at least a summative total 1 at the end, have summative for various categories, fantastic. But one concern, or something that I would like to hear more about, is whether or not state departments of education really ought to get into the business of determining what a rich curriculum for every school in the state is. Having worked at one of these, I'm not sure that the State Department of Education is the best organization to do that. I'm not sure who is, and this gets into the realm of inputs. Are these central administrators, should they be going that far into the details of what is happening in every single class? I'm not totally worried about it, but it's worth thinking about.
All right, thank you very much. Another round of applause for, we'll call them Team Polikoff, but also Stephanie and Matthew. Thank you very much. Next up, cue the music. From Education First, and one of my fellow founders of the Young Education Professionals many, many, many years ago, Jen Vranick. Woohoo!
Is this on? I'm not sure this is on. Sorry. Oh, okay, now it's working. Can Lydia and Jamie just come up and join me again, and we'll just do that high school presentation again? That was great. So our proposal differs from current accountability systems with our 2 design objectives and our 2 rating scales. In our system, schools have to pay attention to the performance of all students, not just those who are at or near proficient, while they also have to focus on closing achievement gaps. And I think maybe the most unique aspect of our proposal is that we give local communities a real hand in how schools are held accountable. We also have a 0 to 100 score scale for what we call the base points, based on the 4 components of ESSA: achievement growth, English learners, and school quality, and a local scale, 0 to 20 points in the same 4 areas. Here's some highlights of how our proposal accomplishes the design objectives. In the base accountability system, we give more credit to students scoring above the standard than students scoring at the college and career ready standard, partial credit if you're at the partial, and 0 points if you're at the lowest level. We also ask schools to select a pre-K to 2 literacy measure so that we're holding the elementary school accountable, not just for the upper grades, but for most of the students. And the majority of the points in our base system, almost 60, come from targeting and improving the performance of students by race, ethnicity, income, by closing the biggest gap that's specific to that particular school, and helping English learners learn English quickly. In our local system, local districts, in collaboration with their schools, select all of the indicators, the measures, and the targets. We also have a waiver, legal, illegal, we'll ask, find out, to enable innovators to go beyond and improve upon the state system. Hopefully Tony's dad can understand this. This is
My dad's going to disinherit.
Good. Well, Mr. Petrilli and Mr. Vranek will recognize the fuel gauges. For every indicator in our system, both base and local points, we want to show how our school's performance compares on the indicator against the state average for demographically similar schools. And that's what you see here. We have a raft of measures, but 80 points of the 100 come from achievement, growth, and English learners. Our other school quality points, majority of those are for reducing chronic teacher absenteeism and student absenteeism. Happy to talk attendance rates. We have the local points. Again, you see the fuel gauges. And the key thing here is these should reflect the local priorities of the school, and it should be a limited set of measures that are the most important ones to reflect it. It might be the Manitou, Colorado music. It might be growth in math for students with disabilities or closing the girl-boy gap in science. It could be a reduction in disproportionality for student discipline. So this is where districts make a compact with their schools and submit a plan to the state and say, here's how we want this to work. We roll the rating up by keeping the 2 scales separate. In our sample school, they did very well on the base points, 78 of 100, much higher than the state demographically similar schools average, and 11 of 20 on the local points. That means they're a yellow school, 6 stars.
Well done, Jen. Woo! Let's hear it for it. Yes. So my dad drives an electric, so okay. All right, Andy, you with the first question.
Yeah, 2 questions just about the local community, like a district part of the accountability system, and I think they're related. But the first part is the value that you get from allowing local differentiation, you lose in statewide comparability. People could say, well, if we're allowing all these districts to do their own thing, how do we know that we have a statewide, fair, equitable system of schools? So what do we lose when we allow local metrics? The second part of this is actually just an administrative question. If a district has to submit to the state its plan for these local metrics, that's one thing in Maryland, where you have 24 school districts. It's an entirely different thing in New Jersey, about the same size-ish of a state with 600 plus school districts. So how do we have a State Department of Education every single year litigate whether or not all these different district plans work?
I forgot your first question already, so I'm going to answer the second one. You know, the variation isn't likely to be that variable, but it does require an SEA to be able to administer it, and I think it's like the performance contract. The state is holding the district's accountability for making good choices with its schools, and the schools are closest to the district, and they work together on what the metrics are. And your first question was?
Yeah, just lack of comparability statewide when you allow differentiation.
Yeah. So 100 points come from the comparable indicators. Districts only select 2 of the sub-indicators that make those up. And we designed this so that the local points cannot trump the base points. That's why you see the scale as they appear as equal here, but you can't get higher performance, more stars from your base points from your local points if your base go down. So we really do have a stronger emphasis on state with allowing for local innovation and flexibility.
Joanne?
My question just got answered, actually.
Oh, excellent. All right. Good. I thought there were some questions maybe about K2 literacy and the role of that. Can you want to talk about that at all? Was there?
Is there a question, or I could talk about K2 literacy? So we thought, for example, that the district's most schools, worth their salt, are already administering all sorts of formative diagnostic assessments to find out where kids are, whether they come in and how far they're getting. And if we're going to look at reading comprehension in grades 3, 4, and 5, we should see where they are before that.
Okay, big round of applause for Jen. Way to go. So again, a proposal a little bit like Dale Chu's and Eric Lirham's in terms of allowing for some menu, or at least in this case it's more locally developed, and for that to be a part of the system. How do you like that idea, as well as some of the other particulars about their proposal? Loving it. A lot of people loving it. Let's see, keep going. Vote, vote, vote. Trying to get more local buy-in into these measures. Seems like a good idea to me. Okay, a lot of love it. Okay, let's hear it. Let's start with Andy this time. We got to finish strong, people. We got to finish strong.
I definitely like it. There are really good things in here, and this, you could tell my biggest interest was in this local component, and you can tell that there are a bunch of different proposals here that are trying to get at the exact same thing, which is a statewide system with a number of graduation rates and test scores. Doesn't capture everything, so whether we're using a grand jury system, whether we're using some sort of inspectorate, whether we use these local metrics, they're all trying to triangulate on what is a school good at and what is it not. So this model, I think, is great. It's a great addition to the conversation.
Joanne.
So I gave this a love it because I thought that the whole way of doing the community engagement and the school level metrics was actually meaningful and built into the accountability system in a way that didn't actually damage its comparability across districts in the state, but that did give communities a way to really take what they were trying to work on that particular year in their school and show it and then report against it. So I thought that was a very, very creative solution to a problem that I think is an important problem to solve.
Okay, Charlene?
Strongly in the love it category for a variety of reasons. The focus on all students, K2 literacy, I really liked the community engagement component of it. Something a little different with local control. As a charter school person, totally excited about that in a meaningful, comparable kind of way. So definitely excited about this, love it.
Okay.
So I went with like it, and I liked it. I'll tell you, in my mind, it had some of the best ideas of any of them I read. In just phenomenal ideas. And I got to tell you, I really liked your dashboard. That was incredible. The only place you tripped me up that kept me from loving it was kind of the amalgamation of what I would refer to as the Sesame Street green, yellow, red system combined with the stars. That one was a little tough for me to digest because I just didn't understand where you were going with it. I thought you were just trying to do too much with that.
All right, great. Thank you, judges. Thank you, Jen Vranick in Education First. And now we've got the creator of the Colorado Growth Model, Rich Wenning. Nice. Looking sharp, too.
Perfect, thank you. Are we on now? All right. So how do we build a next generation accountability system that actually delivers on the promise of every student succeeds? ESSA provides a rare opportunity, I think, to recast educational accountability, repair and build trust, and generate the public will necessary to embrace a hopeful, modernized vision of public education and its purpose. That common purpose, ensuring the adequacy of each individual student's progress towards college and career readiness, and ensuring opportunities for learning commensurate with that expectation. To do so, it requires that we align the design of accountability systems with standards-based student progression and the prominence of student-centered learning and competency-based learning. Time has got to become a variable for students and educators in meeting the outcomes we expect. Importantly, this opportunity allows us to prioritize the development of a robust evidence base useful for both formative and summative purposes, and separately to tackle ratings, consequences, and other summative determinations. And this proposal detaches the first from the second to try to insulate it from these political cycles that ultimately revisit consequences and undermine opportunities for innovation and fidelity of implementation. The shift to personalized learning, progression based on demonstrated competency rather than seat time, student and family ownership of learning experiences, and alignment of in-school and out-of-school learning all require a balanced body of evidence reflecting the academic, the social, emotional, and college and career planning, progress, and attainment of individual students. So how might that body of evidence become standards-based and credentialed in ways that employers, higher ed institutions, and accountability systems recognize as demonstrating student readiness for key transitions? How might that readiness be expressed in a digital portfolio owned by each student and family rather than on pieces of paper stuck in file cabinets or student information systems owned by districts and states? The three design objectives of the system proposed here address these questions and promote trust and learning while providing incentives for innovation and modernization. ESSA opens the door to a far more inclusive accountability system centered on students, families, and educators. Such a system must clearly and unequivocally reveal and build a common understanding of the inequities in opportunity and outcome that constitute the gaps that we've got to close to deliver on the American promise. A next-gen accountability system should supply information that helps marshal a consensus for change in our prevailing and yes, antiquated delivery model and its allocation of resources. But dramatic improvement requires stakeholder trust. Thus, the design of the accountability system should inspire trust, offer needed autonomy, and to create new tools and approaches, and provide fair and engaging and transparent reporting of student outcomes. Thank you.
Oh, look at that timing. Amazing. Of course, this guy has been measuring velocity for his whole career, so that was well done. Okay, Joanne, we'll start with you. This was probably our proposal that got most into some of the stuff that the ed tech world is interested in with personalized learning, competency-based. What's your question?
So one request is it would be great to see some examples like the dashboard, what does this look like? Because it was very theoretical, and I'm worried that we could each read into it what we wanted to. The thing that intrigued me the most about this one is that I think that accountability systems can have a theory of change where they're designed to incent improvement, and that's not what our current accountability systems have been designed to do. They maybe are fair and transparent and whatever, but they're not designed to help promote improvement. Can you talk, I think that is one of the things that you were trying to get at here, but can you talk more specifically about what characteristics you think are most important in order to do that, in order to drive change?
Yeah, great question, and that's definitely a purpose of this. And I guess I just learned this the hard way, trying to impose things on educators and schools and districts over the years. An important issue is a common lexicon and a common set of measures. Once we use different language for policymakers and different language for parents and students, we've just lost the conversation. Bandwidth is finite. So if we can focus the conversation of all actors using that same language, using the same evidence base and how we describe it, we can take advantage of the limited bandwidth folks have to pay attention to what we're doing. And so that issue is a major element of the theory of change here. So common language, the growth measures that we created, SGPs, were based on a pediatric growth chart, something that all parents worked with. And that, again, was the idea to remove the abstraction. And for those of you that want to design various models, go for it. But think about doing those in simulations with specific stakeholders. How we communicate to parents and engage students in their own learning has got to have a common language and a common set of measures that are equally meaningful to all parties.
Okay, Andy, quick question.
Yeah, so both Mike and Joanne got in the same direction that I was headed, which is, I think one of the great enticements of your plan is it suggests to me that the school systems that we might have 10 or 15 years from now with more choice, even course choice, more technology, might more neatly fit into what you're planning here. So I just want to give you a chance to say, as we think about the changing school systems that we're dealing with, how will we not be fighting the last war? How does this prepare us for the future?
Yeah, exactly, Andy. And that's what I tried to do is present something here that wasn't just tinkering with the existing system. The performance imperative that we have is huge. Nothing that we've attempted so far is sufficient to move us from a system where most kids that start behind stay behind. That's what we've got. We've incrementally improved. But to deliver the vast majority of kids to the common destination requires something different. And all of you that have kids, you know that your kids are interacting with information in such a different way. And so in the future, the idea of beginning the process of building the digital portfolio, which yes, will get solved by the tech sector for sure, the tougher part are actually related to what roles we expect educators to play and the roles of parents and how we expand time. So this is resting on sort of those tier 1 indicators at first, but it's inviting the development of those 4 layers of evidence, getting all the way down to teacher judgments using the complete body of evidence about the on-trackness of students so that we get them to engage in professional practice focused on student work.
All right, big round of applause for Rich Wenning. Thank you, Rich. We're going to move to the voting. Keep in mind, you're voting on his proposal, not on how well dressed he is, because he would crush us all on that measure. Did you notice the Trumpian huge in there? You said we had a huge challenge. I love that. Thank you. He's from that part of the country. We'll give that. Okay, love it, 100%. Oh, here we go. Like it, love it, hate it. Again, a big focus on growth, of course, but also on these digital portfolios, competency-based, thinking ahead. Okay, good. Let's hear it. Tony, you first.
Well, Richard, I hate doing this because I love the Colorado growth model. But I went like love it, hate it. Because here's where I came down. First of all, I thought you did an incredible job of talking about what we want education to be. And to Andy's point, if education gets there, how do we measure it in the future? And I would have loved to have had those talking points at one time because you so eloquently did that. But like Joanne said, I kept saying, where's the accountability system here? So I found it to really be some of the most compelling, great, futuristic, visionary ideas without really the ability for me to say, I know what this looks like in practice.
Okay, Charlene?
So that was my love it minus. I think what I love that you didn't talk about a lot in your proposal was the idea of schools and teachers and students as learning communities. And I think that is something that's transformative in education. So I agree, I think maybe we need some details and things like that, but in terms of an idea to move forward with, I think it's really exciting to introduce into the argument.
Okay, Joanne?
Yeah, I want to give it a love it for very similar reasons. I think there's some work to be done to really make it concrete and help people understand what it means, but it's got some of the best ideas of any of the proposals that I read, so I think that it is totally worth reading. There's things like educator opportunity to learn, which I didn't see in any other proposals that I think are just really important drivers of improvement and change, so totally worth reading.
Okay.
So I'm only giving it a like it, but I think that this plan may have the biggest upside of all the ones that I read. So I'm only giving it a like because as a state school board member right now, I probably would not vote for this. I love the idea that we have a federal law now that allows laboratories of democracy to test this kind of thing. And so I would be psyched about voting for this as a state school board member in 2 or 3 years after I see how it plays out.
You want somebody else to try it first, yeah.
That's right.
Okay, very, very responsible. Okay, thank you. Great big round of applause for the judges. We've got one to go, people, one to go. And that one is none other than Dr. Ronald Ferguson, who flew down here this afternoon after teaching at the Harvard Graduate School of Education to be here, which we appreciate. He is also with Tripod Education Partners. Ron Ferguson, who is one of the pioneers around measuring student engagement. Have at it.
Okay.
Come on, it's our 10th one. You'd think we get the timing down.
I guess my time?
Yeah. That doesn't count. That doesn't count.
Okay. Let's assume that the ultimate purpose of education is to achieve excellence with equity. The question is how we can use the metrics and the measurement system as part of ESSA to enable and incentivize excellence with equity, and with regard to what particular outcomes. Okay. The formatting is way off. So let me Notion is with NCLB, we use measurement to hold educators responsible for quality outcomes. With ESSA, we need to use measurement to support educators to meet that responsibility. And what I'm suggesting is that the formatting is way off. What I'm suggesting is that we, out of 100 points in the formula, at least 10 points should go not to measure exactly what the rating is on teacher and student surveys, but instead how effectively schools work to use those ratings for school improvement. And I want to suggest that the reason to take ratings that students give and the teachers give seriously is that they are very predictive of the things that we care about. With the tripod surveys, we find that 3 of the metrics tend to produce value, support value added. Some others tend to predict aspirations. Some others tend to predict student agency, or at least a lot of them predict student agency. What I also want to suggest is that student agency is a great umbrella term to capture a lot of the things that we are interested in. We really want kids to take control of their lives. And social emotional learning, all these other stuff, all things all fit under this heading of student agency. And again, that is the umbrella factor. Second point I want to make has to do with, can we just turn the screen off? The formatting is totally off. Okay. I want to suggest that when we think about achievement gaps, most places measure achievement gaps comparing students in the same district with one another. That is all kinds of problems. If we think of comparing each subgroup in a district with the state average for white kids, for example, that gives you a very different picture of what the achievement gaps are. And I'm suggesting that is politically more tenable, it's more fair, and it will give us a measure that I feel much better about putting into a formula. So the 3 main points that I'm trying to make are that we need to reward not the ratings that teachers or students give to the quality of what happens in their schools, but instead reward how effectively they work to use those ratings to produce school achievement. We need to, for student outcomes other than test scores, we need to use student agency as the heading, and we've got conscientiousness and growth mindset, and a bunch of other things can all go under that heading. And finally, this notion of promoting teacher, using the student survey data and the teacher survey data in an accountability system, but rating the effort instead, that kind of thing to really work is going to need the strong support of district leaders and state leaders. My frustration over 15 years working with student surveys and teacher surveys in schools is that people don't use them as intensively as they could to produce change, and I want to incentivize that by putting at least 10% of the points in a formula to make that happen. And I'll stop with that, having been totally shaken by my PowerPoint not working.
Great job, and apologize if we messed up the PowerPoint. Okay, Charlene, you first.
Thanks. I really appreciated the use of a way to make qualitative measures, not just quantitative measures, a significant part of your criteria. I'd like to ask a little bit more about the idea of personal agency and engagement, yes. And potentially what you see as the benefits and risks of teacher and principal participation, particularly what role does that play in those 10, how do you define effort?
Okay, with the two issues. One is on the agency side, we picked that up out of student surveys. Questions like, in this class, we learn to pay attention to the quality of our work. In this class, we learn to believe we can get smarter. So we ask about the development of agency in a number of different ways in student surveys. Okay, on the participation of teachers and principals, I'm trying to spark professional learning community activity. They always intend to do it, but they never quite get around to it. And if they know they're going to get some points to make that happen, okay, obviously there's also the issue of who's going to make the judgment about how good their effort is. I suggest somebody's already supervising the principal. Why can't that just be part of that? If we don't trust that, we can craft some other ways to get at it.
You know, Ron, it was clear from reading the proposal that you, as one of the leaders in this work to develop measures of student engagement, teacher engagement, that there was some nervousness about attaching high stakes to that.
Yes.
So what, you know, I'd just be curious, as you have kind of an audience here with the states in DC, what should people be thinking about this? Is there a risk that we're going to ruin this whole field of work if we attach high stakes?
There are a number of states and cities that already use these measures as 5 to 10% of, or actually 5 to 15% of their accountability formulas, and in those places it doesn't seem to have done any harm.
Yeah.
Okay. At the same time, in those places they aren't using them as much as I wish they would for reflection and professional learning activity. And so I'm not saying we should use them any less than 5 to 10% perhaps in a formula for overall accountability, but I'm suggesting that in addition to that, we should give people credit for the quality with which they evaluate and respond to what these measures show.
Okay, last question, Tony.
Mike, this is a theme that I've tried to hold till Ron, and I was going to. A number of our proposals, I mean a number of them, talk about a really different role for the LEA and school leadership and the LEA leadership. And I guess my question to you is, what is necessary in terms of training school leaders to do these things?
Yeah. No, I think we need to work on multiple rubrics that they can use. I think they need examples, videographic and other kinds of examples that they can watch to see what it looks like when you actually do this. I think they need to be required to come to trainings 2 or 3 times a year. I think the curriculum in those trainings should be based off what the most effective schools actually do, so they're learning from practice. I think there should be site visits where people visit to see how much of this are you actually doing. And if they aren't doing much, they should be asked to explain why they aren't doing much of it. So I think there can be a system where we build in knowledge from practice for practitioners to learn and create a set of arrangements by which they feel pretty obligated to pay attention.
Please join me in thanking Ron Ferguson. Thank you, Dr. Ferguson, making the trip. We're now going to vote. One last vote. Very exciting here. Thank you, Ellen, for teeing it up. Okay. Whew. We almost made it. Amazing.
That should have another song.
Okay. We could do more songs, yeah? Okay. Vote for Ron's proposal. Likes, love it, few hate it. Think it would be illegal? I keep wondering about the people who think it's illegal. I hope that's not Ann Heislip out there that's doing that one. Okay. Yeah, a lot of like-its. Okay, let's do it again. Final one, Andy, we will start with you. Tell us, what do you think about this very heavy focus on student engagement as well as the other aspects of the plan?
Okay, you guys probably didn't get to see it, but point 4 of his key points to end is, in caps, do not, and then include scores from student, teacher, or parental feedback in state accountability grades. Instead, rate the quality of the effort educators exert to use such feedback in the improvement of teaching. That's a non-starter for me. Kids cannot take someone's effort to the bank. There are lots of great efforts that have been going on for a whole long time. There's a difference between motion and progress. I'm worried that this is all about the motion and not a whole lot about what students are actually taking away. I was not a fan.
Okay. But wait, Andy, you've kind of given up on showing us the card, and then, you know,
I don't like to say hate.
Hate it. Oh, there it is. That's what I'm looking for.
The soft, cuddly Andy.
I know. What is that? He's a politician now. He's on a state board. That's the problem. Okay.
90% of the overall rating is on test scores. This is 10% in the corner of the thing.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So 90% is test scores. We're talking about 10% for this effort at using these ratings. Okay.
I'm squarely in the like it category. I think that the use of these kinds of student surveys is an important thing that we need to get much better at, both listening to students as well as acting on the feedback that we get.
Okay, good. Charlene?
I'm squarely in the love it category. There are 4 main reasons. One is that I appreciate the 10%. I think as a school leader, we already do these things in terms of principal and teacher evaluations, and this actually gives it a purpose. So I'm a huge fan of that. I think it introduces in the development of agency for teachers, for students, and for school leaders. And quite honestly, as a school leader, I'd love to be able to actually work with what is good for the students in my school and not always be told by other people perhaps like in Arizona, the State Board of Education, about what we should do. I appreciated the idea of subgroups and really measuring subgroups against a meaningful achievement gap. I have a concern about the equity when we're just measuring like and like. So I'm a big fan. Love it, love it, love it.
Okay.
So Ron, I didn't think I would do this, but I did like it. I mean, and I would tell you that I started when I read it, the first time I read it, it was like, I was exactly where Andy was. And the second time I read it, I thought, now wait a minute, this is starting to make sense to me. And then hearing your explanations, I really began to understand it. So I was a strong like it, and good job.
All right, one more round of applause. Very nice. Okay. Whew. Somehow we have done it. Amazing, huh? And yet I can't quite end yet because we just got to do a little bit of analysis here. Okay? Hang with me, a couple minutes. All right, very quick question. Anything that you read in these proposals or heard here today that you think the U.S. Department of Education should not allow? Should not allow. And I guess you think they would, of course, have the legal authority to disallow under the law. Anything. Thinking about, for example, not just looking at proficiency when looking at academic achievement, but looking at the other performance levels or scale scores. Some of the proposals said for the ELL indicator, weighting that proportionately to how many kids, ELL kids actually are in the school. That was something that came up. Not taking those disparate indicators and rolling them up necessarily, maybe having 4 or 5 grades instead of a single grade, including the inspection systems or the locally designed indicators or a jury of their peers. Any of that stuff. You think all of that? Okay, that's interesting. And U.S. Department of Education, please, for the love of God, listen to these people. Okay, finally, what others, well, let me ask you two last questions for each of you, and you can answer one or both or neither if you want. Any advice for the U.S. Department of Education, and anything you heard here today that you really are hoping states pick up in particular? Andy, we'll start with you.
I hope that people walk away from this hopeful about the promise of ESSA, that what we saw is 10 great proposals, each of which bringing something new and different to the table. And I found myself reading through the proposal saying, I wish I could take this piece of Sherman's and this piece of Chad's and this piece of First. Wow, I could cobble something together here. This shows that NCLB was good, accomplished lots of great stuff, but enabling states to experiment for a while and figure out what works for their context and for the future makes a whole lot of sense to me. So the more flexibility the Department of Education could have for a little while, I think we're going to be in good shape.
All right, Joanne, anything for your former colleagues or for the states?
I think the one thing that we saw here, and it was baked into the way that you designed the competition, Mike, that was really good, was starting with the design principles. And I would say even above that, starting with the theory of change, like what role do you want your accountability system to play in your greater system? What are you trying to incent? Or what are you trying to stop and why? And what are the principles for doing that? And then putting an accountability system together. Like, I think that is one of the big lessons and big takeaways that I hope states take from this. I also think that we need to make models like the ones that we saw here today available far and wide, because I think people just need the creativity that was shown here today to help them spark the right kinds of conversations in states to help them figure out which pieces they want to take from what and why in order to create the system that's going to be best for them.
Great.
Yes, and yes. First of all, I just wanted to really appreciate the opportunity to read and think about the creativity. I agree that the design component was most important, and what I'm taking away, perhaps most significantly, is redesign from a redesign perspective and not just tinkering with what we already have done or what we're experienced doing. I'm particularly, the two elements I'd like to have taken away is the idea of multiple tiers, where different tiers can have different purposes, ideally including some local control or what we've been calling the soft skills or, some of those kinds of things. And the component of agency for teachers and students. Too often that's missing in these accountability systems, which for me makes them very not purposeful.
Great.
First, Mike, I'll give you a short commercial for Fordham, and that is to kind of piggyback on something Joanne said. This exercise is of paramount importance because, unlike Andy, I didn't have a lot of hope with ESSA. And the reason is I think there is a premium on state leadership. And I think that the pendulum of the education reform discussion has pushed us in a different direction than we were heading at one time. So I had a real fear we would backslide, and I had a real fear we would backslide because we wouldn't have many of these templates or these great ideas or these, parts of recipes to take to states. So I think it's a huge service Fordham has done for states to help insert creative thinking into ESSA, and it gives me greater hope.
All right. Well, thank you for all of that. No, I appreciate that. Let me thank my wonderful Fordham colleagues, Ellen Alpau, who organized the event and all the voting and a million details, Alyssa Schwenk as well, and on Twitter, Audrey Kim doing the AV work, Brandon, who did a ton of work getting all these proposals up online. Thank you for all of that. I do hope that people will continue to read all of the proposals. I hope you bloggers out there will write about this, talk about which ways you would mix and match. And if there are ideas that have not yet surfaced today, please put those out there as well. This conversation is just beginning. Otherwise, let me just say that we are back here again next week at the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, February 11th, for a panel about the most comprehensive analysis, evaluation of next generation assessments that has ever been done. We'll be looking at PARCC, Smarter Balanced, ACT, Aspire, and MCAS results out next February 11th. And you can come here, a bunch of smart people talk about what we learned. So see you next week, and otherwise, thanks for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.